Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Navigating a Graduate Degree with Dean MacLachlan. So today's event is part of our Choose Grad York series, intended to help folks make a decision about attending graduate school at York. Today's presentation will be done by our Vice Provost and Dean, Alice MacLachlan. You're in for a treat, folks. Take it away, Alice.
Thank you so much, Eileen. I appreciate that very kind introduction. And thank you so much to all of you. It's absolutely wonderful to know that you've given up an hour of your day, lunchtime if you're in the same time zone as me, or wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. I'm so glad you've come to listen and perhaps ask questions, to think a little bit about what it is to do a graduate degree and how to set yourself up for success in that graduate degree. I was saying to Eileen before the session began that in some ways, this session can almost feel like rushing you past the question of what does it mean to go to graduate school? What am I in for? How am I doing this master's or this doctoral program? But I think it's one of the best things I recommend to folks who are thinking about getting started or have just accepted their offer or even imagining graduate school in their future is to understand exactly what's involved in um, a postgraduate degree, and to understand how sort of the rhythms of the degree and the various elements of it come together so you can navigate these as smoothly as possible, take advantage of all the supports that we provide for you and that are available to you, and come out of your time at York, your time in your graduate degree, first of all, with that degree in hand, and also a strong sense of the skills you've gained, the research and professional project you've engaged in, and that the calling or the vocation that made you come to graduate school in the first place, that you have succeeded in your endeavor and you're ready for the next step. So, in a minute, I am going to tell you a little bit about what we'll be covering today. But before I do that, I am really honored to be able to share with you York's brand new land acknowledgement, which has come out of conversation and sharing and new agreement signing with local First Nations tribes in our area, and that I find incredibly meaningful to be able to speak to you and share with you today. So, as you are listening, since this is happening virtually, I invite you to reflect on the land that you find yourself, where it is, what the history is, who's been there, and what your trajectory in history is that brought you to that space and that place, so that we can take a moment together to reflect on our shared land, space, and history. So, First Nations people have lived on this part of Turtle Island for millennia, stewarding the land, the water, and all that contributes to life in this region. Today, the culture and presence of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples enrich the lands and the people of this territory. More than 2 centuries ago, the Mississauga people welcomed settlers to this territory, providing sustenance and engaging in trade and commerce. Today, York University campuses are located on the Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13 lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the lands of the Anishinaabe of the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our campuses are also situated on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Treaty history is foundational, and it is our collective responsibility to honor the land as we honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be learning, working, and thriving on this land, and we commit to learn the truth and be active in the process of reconciliation. So thank you all for joining me in this virtual space and from the many places that you find yourself. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. First of all, I'm going to provide you, I'll talk a little bit about what a milestone is and give you a sense of the general milestones that you'll find yourself in depending on your degree type and your degree structure. And I'm going to warn you, the next 2 slides really involve a chart with lots of T numbers in it. And that's just going to refer to the terms of a graduate program. It might be a little daunting at first, but I feel confident but by the end of the hour, you'll have a real sense of what they mean in terms of your actual progress to degree and your academic journey. So bear with me for the charts that are to come. We'll talk about masters, whether they're course-based, whether they have a major research paper or a thesis. And then we'll talk about the milestones that you find in a PhD program. Coursework you take at the beginning, comprehensive exams that you may take at the end of that coursework, sometimes called comps, whether this is an exam, a paper, or an oral presentation that you give to your supervisory committee. We'll talk about pulling that supervisory committee together, getting your research proposal for your independent project together, engaging in your ethics review, and then writing your dissertation and defending your dissertation. And then I'll give you the one piece of advice I have, which is you plan from the end backwards, and then you start from the beginning and move forward. So we'll think through a master's degree with that framework and then a PhD with that framework. And then I'm going to zoom in on one part of one key milestone that I think can hold up a lot of people at both the master's and the doctoral level, but maybe especially at the doctoral. And that's the ethics and proposal review process. And I'm going to say this is really the linchpin because it represents the shift from the foundation you need to be able to do your big independent project and your big independent project. If you think about a teeter-totter or a seesaw, you've been sort of getting all the foundation work and then you're about to dive in independently and do your independent research. This is that moment in midair where your stomach might lift up a little bit and you might feel like you're free floating as you shift from that supported, structured foundation to the independent research that's used flying solo. And so it's crucial that you have just the right support in this moment. And I'll explain how the ethics and proposal give you that support and why it's so important that you get through them in a timely manner. And so after talking about what's ahead of you and what you get to do or have to do, depending on your perspective, I'll then explain all the trampolines and cushions and soft landing that are there to support you, to lift you up, to elevate you, and to help you along your way. So we'll talk about supports for personal and research development, including external funds like Tri-Agency and OGS. Those are government scholarships. We'll talk about FGS's Academic Excellence Fund, and then various professional skills development opportunities that we provide at FGS. And then with luck, there'll be a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So that there is time for Q&A, I'm going to dive in quickly and start by talking about what a graduate milestone is and why it matters. And I think I'm going to be using the language of a journey a lot here because, any degree, any serious endeavor is a kind of journey. If something is worth doing, it takes effort, initiative, commitment, and you do something, but it changes you while you do it. It's somewhat transformative. That's especially true for graduate school. You come out of graduate school transformed, both in your skills, your professional capacities, your research, your knowledge basis, and your ability to do independent work. But you may also find it changes how you see yourself, how you understand the world and yourself, and how you understand the research question that led you to want to do that graduate degree in the first place. But a journey is a long and confusing thing, and you're going to need a map, you're going to need supplies, provisions, you're going to need a sense of the terrain, and you're also going to need some sort of sense of your progress. I used to joke during my PhD that sometimes I was uncomfortable just being left alone in the room with my dissertation. I loved my project. Going to graduate school is the best thing I've ever done. I loved my thesis for my master's and my dissertation for my PhD. But I'll tell you, it was daunting. And it wasn't just daunting in the sense that a term paper can be daunting or a difficult email can be daunting. It's daunting because it takes place over a long period of time. You can think, oh, I have 2 years to write this. If I have 2 years to write this, how much do I need to do by tomorrow, by next week, by 2 months from now? If I set a goal for 2 months from now and I'm behind, does that mean I've wrecked my whole plan? How do I readjust? In other words, the sheer length of time in which you engage in sort of independent research at a graduate level can make it hard to know how to understand that time and how to measure progress, how to see how far you've come, how far you should have come, whether you are meeting expectations. Now, the early part of a graduate degree, it's very structured because it's a lot like your undergraduate. And so you know whether you're doing what you're supposed to and how you're doing because you take courses and you get grades. And that's familiar. And believe me, I already know that all 140 of you, or however there are in this webinar, are already really good at doing courses and doing well in them because you're the kind of person who's interested in graduate school. So you love to learn and you love school. But in your graduate degree, school is going to change. If you are doing a coursework-based master's, that's not necessarily the case. You are going to be taking courses just like you did in undergrad, but the nature of the courses is going to change. You will be asked to do more independent work. You might be asked to lead a seminar at some point. You might be asked to take on independent projects within those courses. So you will be challenged, but your time will be measured over the course of your degree, which will itself be divided into coursework. So if you look at the lower left-hand side of the slide that I've shared, you will see that typically coursework masters are 1 year or 3 terms. So this is the first of the two red rectangles, which says T1, T2, T3. A coursework master's is 1 year. You take 3 terms of coursework and you're done. But many master's degrees that have both courses and a thesis are longer than just 1 year. And in that case, you will be needed to taking courses while also planning to write your major research paper or to write your major, to write your thesis. And we'll talk in the next slide a little bit about what that looks like. A doctoral degree, a PhD, is a whole other kettle of fish. And this is the one where milestones become really important. Remember, I described the graduate degree as a journey. Milestones are, if you like, signposts on that journey, markers that tell you you've come 20 kilometers, you have 30 kilometers left to go, you're halfway through, you've walked this far, you've crossed the first 2 hills, and you only have a gentle valley left. Or you've made good progress, but you have the big steep hill up ahead. You can think of them as mile markers in a marathon race, if sometimes graduate degrees do feel like a marathon. And you can think about how helpful it is for pacing yourself as a runner to know whether you're at the early stage of the race, the middle stage, or the final stage, and how hard the terrain is to come. And that's why it can be very helpful to plan from where you need to be at the end and work backwards towards the beginning. Because if in a doctoral degree, if you like, it divides roughly into 3 stages. Your coursework stage, which is typically 1 year, and some programs may go into the second year. Then you have your qualifying stage. And the qualifying stage is marked by gathering up what you need in order to do the research. So in your qualifying stage, and this is roughly year 2 to into year 3, you will need a supervisor. If you are working in the sciences or in some fine arts programs, you will need a supervisor before you even start. So that's going to be easy for you. But across the board, by term 5, your first milestone, you will need to know you have a supervisor. And then by term 8, so if term 5 is in your second year, term 8 is in your third year, you will need to have a supervisory committee. This is gathering your team, if you like, assembling your team, if that's the pop culture reference for you. So you've assembled your team who will help you do what you need to do. You will also need to be tested to make sure that you're ready. And in many programs, this takes the form of comprehensive exams or qualifying exams. This, as I say, may be an oral defense, a conversation with your committee. It may be some papers that you need to write. It may be a written exam, and that will depend on your program. And then you need a plan. And the plan that you have is your proposal. And that you need to have finished by the end of your third year at the very latest, though many programs will say earlier. And your proposal is basically the shape of the project that you will be engaging in for the third stage of your degree. So the coursework, the foundation, the qualifying stage is gathering your team, getting your plan together, making sure you have everything you need for the journey, for the qualifying exams. And that takes place in years 2 to 3. And then you have writing the actual project, engaging in the research and doing the actual project. Now, engaging in the research has one more step left in the qualifying stage, and that's making sure that all your ethics processes are clear. Part of what it is to be a researcher is to commit to the standards and expectations and best practices of our profession as academics and researchers, and that includes ethics processes. So you cannot engage in your independent research until you have ethics approval to do that research. And ethics approval doesn't come overnight because a series, it has to be prepared, reviewed, ensured it is correct, that all the right questions have been answered. Are you working with human subjects, with non-human animals, with dangerous materials or chemicals? That has to be approved by a committee and then reported back to you. That all takes time. So you need to build the time in, which means you need to be planning early. All right, so coursework, foundation, making sure that you are, if you like, in shape, trained to take this on. Second, qualifying stage, getting your team together, getting your plan in order with the proposal. testing yourself to make sure you have the foundation from that first stage to go through the qualifying exams, and then setting out with the plan, knowing you're following best practices by having your ethics approval along with your proposal means you are all set for the writing. Now, most graduate degrees at York are 4 years. That means you are expected to complete them in 4 years. So if you do stage one, the foundation in year one, the qualifying in years 2 and 3, you would then write for year 4. But here's the thing, life happens and things go wrong. So at York, we actually recognize the possibility of a longer writing stage than it might be listed in your proposal. It's perfectly normal to take 5 years, even though our programs are 4 years. But you want to plan for 4 years so that if you need to, you can take 5, or indeed go into your 6th year. I'm going to explain why you definitely don't want to be planning for 6 years in a couple of slides, because again, there's that question of plan, the reality, and then any hiccups. And you want to be making sure you have everything into account. But if you are doing this work, if you're thinking through the milestones and understanding the purpose of each stage, coursework builds your knowledge foundation and your skill foundation. Qualifying exam sets up what you need in order to engage in the work, the qualifying stage. And then the third, the dissertation phase is when you get to do the work. And it's fun, I promise. It's hard, it's a lot of work, but it's a joy and a calling, and it can be just extraordinarily wonderful. Then you're all set to complete. Let's put the PhDs to one side, though. Before we get going on the details of that, I want to return to the master's degree and just zoom in on the master's degree milestones. So remember, in the last slide, I said that a master's degree can be either 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms, or 6 terms. 3 terms master's degrees are usually coursework only. And in some ways, those are just as challenging and just as significant and can set you up for doctoral research or a professional career just as well. But in terms of milestones, it's pretty easy to understand. You have a 3-year master's degree and you have to complete your coursework, or sorry, a 3-term master's degree, and you complete your coursework over those 3 terms. If your master's degree includes an MRP or a thesis, often, not always, but often, you will have longer to do it in. That's not the case. There are some master's degree, in fact, in my own home graduate program of philosophy, where even if you take the option to do an MRP, you must complete it in 3 terms. In that case, notice the most left of the blue lines. That would mean when your thesis is due. If in any case, however long your program is, if you are doing a thesis or a major research paper or some sort of independent project, you have to be making sure you get all your coursework done in time while also planning to make sure that you're in a position to complete and defend your major research paper at the same time. And so that means you have to be making sure you've started that big independent project almost as soon as you get to York. So that means finding a supervisor very quickly, making sure you've talked to your supervisor and you have a plan, you understand the expectations, like the length, whether there needs to be a literature review, what degree of independent scholarship there should be. Are you working in your supervisor's lab or independently? What is expected in terms of analysis, what methods you might be expected to use, and whether you have the training for those methods. All of these questions you want to be asking right away so that you can begin work on it and plan to have it done by the end of 4 terms, 5 terms, or 6 terms. But still, overall, the master's degree is either one thing, coursework, or 2 things, coursework plus independent paper. And there's a lot of support in master's programs to ensure that if there are 2 things, you are doing the independent paper as you move through the degree so that you can complete on time. Where things get a bit trickier, and that's for 2 reasons. 1, because the degree is longer, and 2, because the project is bigger, is with the PhD. It's longer, there's more stages, and the project is bigger. So that's why we're going to spend a little bit more time on the PhD degree milestones. So here we are, we're back to the bigger picture. And as you can see, there's this little encouraging graphic on the bottom. I want you to all take a minute to picture yourself as the happy person at the end cheering with the hat that says you're at convocation. So how do you go about thinking through your PhD? Again, plan from the end and then work from the beginning. What is the last thing that you will need to do to get your PhD? The last thing you need to do to get your PhD is to defend your dissertation. Your dissertation defense happens when your entire committee says, yes, this dissertation is ready for defense. We have signed off on it. They then find an external examiner, an internal external examiner, and a chair, arrange for your examination committee to find a date and time. You defend your dissertation, and hopefully there are only some small editorial changes or no changes at all, and you're able to submit it shortly afterwards, have it processed. There might be revisions afterwards. Who knows? There might be edits that are required, so you might need a little bit more time. But let's assume it's not too much time afterwards. So the defense is the final point. But notice I said your committee has to say it's ready to go, and they have to arrange for the examining committee to be put together. That takes some time. For your committee to say your defense is ready to go, they need time to read that your dissertation is ready for defense. They need time to read the whole dissertation, a completed draft. That's a few more months that you have to give them. So now we're moving several months back from the defense. It might be 3, it might even be more, depending on how quickly your committee can read what may be a 200-page document with, your brilliant detailed analysis, your careful, thorough literature review, your explanation of your methodology, your interviews, your data, your results, your reflections, and so on. This is a lot of work. You want them to take it seriously and look at it. So now we're moving a little bit further back, and now you're looking at writing the dissertation, and probably it will be at least 3 chapters. It might be 4 or even 5 or more, who knows? And so you'll have to plan for the writing of each of these chapters. And that means you have to have all your research work done. That might include your field work or your lab work or your time in the archives or your time in the library or whatever it is that your particular discipline requires, whether that's chemistry or anthropology or education or film studies or philosophy. So each of those then requires time for the thinking and the research work. And remember, to do that, you have to have your proposal approved. That's your plan of action. That's us as an institution saying, yes, we support you doing this research. And with the ethics sign off, we agree you are doing it, keeping in mind the risks to yourself and others, and that you've undertaken this in a responsible way. So now you have your proposal ready to go, which means you have to have time to get your proposal approved by your committee and then sent to the Faculty of Graduates, and then sent to your program, then to the Faculty of Graduate Studies. That's us, so we can all sign off on it, along with your ethics documents being sent to the Office of Research Ethics. So notice there's some approval time in there, and there's the writing and the review. And that's why you'll notice, even though, as you can see from here, we do at York provide funding for up to 17 terms. We provide you funding for those of you who come in with a funding package, which is not everybody, but is many students at York, a funding package that includes both a fellowship and TA wages. You will have support for 17 terms. Notice that might seem like a very long time. That's almost 6 years. Notice how much has to happen to get to the point where you're ready to dive into that, and how much to dive into the research, and how much time it takes to do the research, write it up, send it to your committee, have them read it and approve it, get ready for the defense and defend. So that's why the degree milestones, those early markers of progress, those early hoops to jump through, the things you need to do before you can get started on the project, that's why they're not just necessary to set you up to do the work well. As I explained on the last slide, it's also important to get them out of the way in a timely manner so that you're ready to give your research and your writing the time it needs to be ready to defend on time. So now we've come back to the qualifying stage. And remember, at this point, you will need to get your supervisor, your supervisory committee, your proposal, and your ethics together, as well as write any qualifying or comprehensive exams that your program has. And to do that, it has to be the case that you've completed all your coursework. So if you are planning to the very end, I recommend that you plan to finish in year 5 at the latest, so that year 6, which has lower funding, the fellowship is finished at that point, it's only TA wages, it's only meant to be a sort of completion safety net, as it says on the slide. So that's held as a kind of worst case scenario if you need it. But you are planning to defend well within year 5, and I would suggest earlier in year 5, so that if there's scheduling issues or a committee member goes on parental leave or something happens, you have time to adjust for it. So now you're looking at 5 years to do the 3 stages. You definitely want to get the coursework done as soon as possible. You know how to do this. You've been doing coursework for years and years now. You have a bachelor's and a master's degree. So get that out of the way as close to 1 year as you possibly can, so that you have your second year and part of your third year to think through the important preparatory work of the qualifying stage. Your deadline for getting a supervisor is by the middle of term 5. For most of you, that will be the winter term of your second year. At that point, you should already be thinking about what your research project will be, sketching out a proposal with your supervisor. I mean, that's why you chose them, talking to them about the project, figuring out what kind of ethics review will be needed, starting to get ready for that ethics review, so that in year 3, the official university deadline for getting a supervisory committee is term 8. And for submitting your proposal and your ethics review is term 9. So that's the winter and spring of your third year. But to be able to submit by then, you want to have them ready to go by the end of your second year. So you're just cleaning them up and getting them ready to go in the fall. And you're already starting to look forward to the groundwork of actually doing the work. And so it can be very easy to think, hang on, this degree is 5 years long. I don't need to worry, I'm just in my first year. And you don't. And there is time for all of it. And we've designed it so there is time for all of it. But it's helpful to remember there's the foundational stage, the qualifying stage, and the dissertation stage, to give yourself time for each of these. And the fact that we have official university milestones helps you know what stage you're in and what kind of progress you should have made. So you should have finished your coursework at the very latest by the end of your second year, and ideally a little earlier. You should have your supervisor officially assigned to you so that there's someone guiding your project and someone you can start to talk to about all the work that needs to go into the qualifying stage by the middle of your second year in term 5. And then over the course of that second and third year, you should have your committee together and your proposal ready to go with your ethics review, so that by the end of year 3, by the end of term 9, you are all set to begin the exciting work, the reason you came here. Do your research, pull it together, analyze it, draw your conclusions, and then write it up, so that you have a good year and a half to research and write the bulk of your dissertation before you're ready to share it with your committee and then defend it at your defense for your examining committee, and then get told those wonderful words, congratulations, doctor, you passed. Okay, I've said a lot about this slide because I think it's really important to understand the big picture, but I do want to dive in on that crucial middle point I've been talking about quite a bit, namely proposal and ethics. So all thesis and dissertation proposals, these are crucial for understanding what your research is, what you're going to do, what this will involve in terms of research activities, who will be involved in it, whether you and your supervisor and your supervisory committee are on the same page. Keep in mind, all proposals should include appropriate and complete research ethics forms. If you're like me, if you're a philosopher and you're mostly reading books, writing about books, thinking about books and ideas, you may not be working with human or non-human participants. I handle very few hazardous materials other than coffee in my research, but it's still important that I fill out a research ethics form indicating that I won't be doing any of those things. And that's a way of checking in my responsibility as a researcher and York's responsibility as an institution to make sure everyone is following best practices. So your thesis and dissertation proposal will first be approved by your supervisor and your supervisory committee. It will then be signed off by the director of your graduate program, that's your GPD, and then delivered to FGS, that's us, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, for a final sign-off. Again, research ethics is such an important component of this. Any research with human participants, non-human animals, or biohazardous materials must be reviewed by the Office of Research Ethics. For courses and for MRP level, that's Master's Major Research Paper, this can be approved at the program level or a department level ethics committee. But in both cases, there needs to be ethics approval, and you cannot start your research until you have received formal ethics approval. You risk invalidating or being unable to continue your research if you do so without formal approval. This is so important. And keep in mind, if the proposed research involves an elevated or might involve an elevated risk to the researcher, further health and safety considerations will be completed by a risk assessment, and you may even need a health and safety plan. I hope this is clear that this is very much in your own interest as well as our interest. It's important. All of us are committed to the idea of socially engaged knowledge creation, research for a better world. And that involves doing research as though we lived in that better world, taking care of ourselves and others around us to the highest possible standards. So that's why we insist on all of this. Now, at this point in this presentation, I always think, wow, if I were listening right now, I might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. This is a lot. So let's take a minute and acknowledge this is a lot. In some ways, that's okay because all of you have signed up for a lot. That's why you're the kind of people who are interested in graduate school. But I also want to remind you that the whole point of milestones is you're never doing the whole project at once. It's never all at once. There's always a marker to get to next. So it might seem really daunting to think I have to do a PhD, but it's not so daunting to finish your coursework. It's not so daunting to make sure you've gotten your supervisor form in. It's not even that daunting to write a research proposal. It might sound daunting right now, but that's because you haven't had a chance to talk to other students in your program. Your supervisor hasn't explained how it works. Your graduate program director hasn't shown you samples by other students. You haven't started to understand, oh yeah, a research project looks like this, so a proposal looks like this. You haven't started to fill it in. Milestones structure each step of the journey so that you're always prepared for what's in front of you. And while you can see the big picture, you only have to be not anxious, but sort of anticipatory, anticipating, ready for just the next step. And it's a way of scaffolding you through the degree so that you have structure, support, and you know what's expected and what's demanded of you at every stage. And also, you're not doing it alone. There are supports for students at York. And many of these supports, because I know that's often first on people's mind, are financial. So let me tell you about some of the things that are there to help you while you devote your time and energy to your research project. York has bursaries based on financial need, and you can learn more of these at the Faculty of Graduate Studies website. There are also some internal, that means donor-funded awards. Some are based on merit, some are based on financial need. Once you accept and are enrolled at York, you have the opportunity to fill out information in our FAS, Financial Aid Awards and Scholarship System. Doing so will make it clear what you are eligible for and will alert you to which awards to apply for. At the Faculty of Graduate Studies, we take research very seriously. And so we have an academic excellence fund that is set up to support students with research activities, whether that's field work or presenting at a conference or getting to a particular archive or library or lab or whatever it might be. So this is a fund for conference presentation and research expenses. Speak to your supervisor or other professors in your graduate program. Sometimes research assistantships are available. These are a stipend for assignments related to your research. So if you and your supervisor are working on a particular project together and it's a shared research project, they may be able to support you in exchange for you putting together an annotated bibliography for them, or analyzing some data, or transcribing some interview, or pulling out key data from interviews transcripts or something like that, that you will then both use in your research. And of course, there are external awards that are administered through the university. The most well-known of these are the Canadian and Ontario government awards. So there's the Canadian Tri-Council scholarships. These are Canada graduate scholarships at the doctoral level or at the master's level. They're divided into social sciences and humanities, sciences and engineering, sort of STEM fields, and CIHR for health research. You can apply for these at both the doctoral and the master's level. And most graduate programs will run a number of information sessions about how to do that each year, and we run them as well in FGS. And these are a very substantial source of support for all graduate students who get them. There's also the Ontario Graduate Scholarship that you can apply for in conjunction with the Tri-Council scholarships or on their own. I should mention, actually, this didn't used to be the case, but now both the Tri-Council scholarships and the Ontario Graduate Scholarships have a small portion set aside for international students, which I very much appreciate. I think that's important for equity, and it makes a big deal. And there may be other external scholarships to keep in mind in your field that your graduate program will be aware of. You can learn all about these sources of support by going to the link at the bottom of the page. So yorku.ca, grad studies, students, current students, awards and scholarships. So that sort of sets you up materially, but you may be interested to know what other kinds of support we can offer for this endeavor, for the doing the graduate degree, and for thinking about what comes next. And so we also have a lot of supports available designed to enhance your professional skills development. You can find all of these by going to one page, the Graduate and Postdoctoral Professional Skills webpage. This tells you all the graduate level campus opportunities in a single location. It can be everything from improving your quantitative or qualitative research methods, doing better conference presentations, to learning how to take an academic curriculum vitae and turn it into a professional resume, learning how to apply for jobs outside of the professoriate, so outside of academic jobs, learning how to look for internships or other kinds of experiential education, networking opportunities, working on your writing skills, sort of everything you could possibly imagine there. We also offer at York for all graduate students a unique opportunity to engage in active participation in planning your own professional skills training and career management. So setting out to intentionally say, part of my journey as a doctoral student will be ensuring that I have the skills I want to go into to become a professor, or perhaps to work in the public service, or to engage in a private sector research job, or to shift from this graduate work to perhaps policy work in my field, or even diplomatic work or something like that, or to engage in private sector research would be another one. And so we highly encourage students to take advantage of the individualized development plan. This is an extraordinary way to sort of build in skills milestones alongside the academic milestones that they're set out for you. But basically, my advice for you at this stage is don't feel overwhelmed. This is the beginning. Everything is daunting at the very beginning. But if you've been accepted to a graduate program, it's because you are capable of doing a graduate program and succeeding and flourishing. My job is to make sure that you don't just finish your graduate program, complete your graduate program, but you do so in a way that is energizing, exciting, meaningful, thoughtful, deliberate, and flourishing. And so having the kind of plan that I've talked about, where you're looking at the ending and making sure you give yourself enough time for each stage, making sure you're helping yourself to every source of support available. And that with these sources of support, you are sort of stepping confidently, deliberately into just getting to that next marker, finishing coursework, finding your supervisor, setting up your committee, completing your comprehensive or qualifying exams, getting that proposal and that ethics submitted in time so that you can begin the research, look towards the writing, get the writing done, defend your dissertation, home free. We're here to help you at every step. We're here to help you financially, materially, with advice, with skills, to connect you to the right kinds of scholarships, bursaries, awards, in a sense to make sure that you are the extraordinary graduate students that I know you can be, and that someday I get to be standing on the stage, shaking your hands and saying, congratulations, doctor, or congratulations, master, you've done it. I think that's about it for me. I think it is time to take some questions. So what I am going to do, first of all, I'll just take a minute to let you see all the ways you can stay in touch with us. I'd say the most crucial one is the email address at the top. Believe me, the people who answer FGS apply at yorku.ca know what they're talking about. Our recruitment team is extraordinary. If you have questions, they have answers. And if they don't have the answers, they're very good at finding out who does and getting back to you. But for my part, I think I will shift over to questions now. So I am just going to open up the Q&A and see what we have here. Excellent. These are some really good questions. So I'm going to work through as many of them as I can. Just going to, all right, fantastic. So one question came right off the bat. And, even as I was talking, I thought this question might come because I didn't think I was clear. One question was, can courses be taken in any year except for year one of PhD programs? And the answer is yes. In fact, many PhD programs, sorry, let me put it this way. Many PhD programs expect that you finish your coursework in year one. Not all do. Many have it set up so you're actually doing courses right through the first 2 years. Um, so it's going to vary the year number. What is the case is it's expected that you sort of get the bulk of your coursework, any core mandatory courses and your electives out of the way before you start the qualifying stage of your degree. Part of the reason for that is just it's really hard to be juggling more things than you have to. And also psychologically, it can be hard to have incomplete coursework hanging over you as you're trying to think about the next thing. But at a certain point, you have to sort of do A before you can submit B and so on. There will be a stage at which you have to have everything but the dissertation done to be considered ABD or all but dissertation, and that would include coursework. So yes, many people will take courses in their second year. Some may choose to continue to audit, to just sort of sit in on courses in areas that interest them or that relate to their dissertation research as a way of enriching their own research, connecting with their supervisor, and so on. There's not a strict limit here, except that it's important to do the required courses as early as possible so that you can turn your attention to focus on the next stage. So it's not as simple as year one or bust. But it is true that it's a good idea to get them done so that you can direct your attention towards your proposal, your qualifying exams, and your ethics review. And just speaking anecdotally, I do find that students who have a number of incomplete essays or labs or coursework hanging over them then find it hard to sort of get that done and move forward. Okay. For masters with major research papers, do we need to know our thesis before starting the program? Now, this is going to vary a little bit by program. So one of the things I do recommend for everybody, no matter what your question is one really good place to ask, first of all, is the graduate program. If you have an academic question, I suggest emailing the graduate program director. So questions about courses or certain kinds of academic standards or expectations. If you have an administrative question about enrolling or registering or getting your funding, or getting your visa, or making sure you're on campus on the right day, I would talk to the graduate program assistant. That's the staff person who works with the graduate program director, who's a faculty member, a professor. And roughly speaking, they divide the work so that the GPD, the director, the faculty member, answers academic questions, and the GPA, the administrator, the staff person, answers administrative questions, sort of like technical details about the website, the program, the details of enrolling, and so on. Having said that, no, you don't always need to know your thesis, and many students will come in with an idea, but will formalize that idea over the course of their first semester. And that's especially true if you are in a 4-term, 5-term, or 6-term master's degree. The only time where I would say you should have some idea of what you're going to do for your MRP is if you're in a 3-term master's degree. And that's because it's very hard to get one done in 3 terms if you don't come in with at least some idea, some background knowledge, perhaps a research question. So for a 3-term one, have some idea. For a 4 or 5 or 6-term one, you will have time in the degree. I mean, have some idea of what you're interested in or what you might think it might be, but be prepared for things to shift over your first semester. Okay, here is another good question. Hi, how do you gather a supervisory committee? Do I need to look for people from different universities interested in my research? Will I be guided in that? That's a really great question. Now, there's a reason you're expected to have a supervisor by term 5 and a supervisory committee by term 8. Notice there are 3 more terms to find your supervisory committee. And term 8, which is the very, very final deadline, that's our deadline at FGS rather than the program's deadline, that's a lot of time. That's basically 2.5 years into your degree. So, and the reason it's 2.5 years is that gives you time to work with your supervisor, who you found by the beginning of your second year, to talk to them, and they will guide you in who else should be on the committee. It would be very rare for someone to have to do it on their own. A supervisor is there to guide you, and that'll include them suggesting who will be what are often called your second reader and your third reader, or your committee members. Typically, your entire supervisory committee will be at York and will often be from within your own graduate program. That isn't always the case for interdisciplinary work, and certainly not for interdisciplinary studies. But in general, your supervisory committee will be drawn from the graduate program you are in, but your supervisor will help you. Okay, here is another great question. I know this is for full-time programs. How does it look for a part-time program course for a course-based program student who is doing it full-time? And the answer is it looks similar but stretched out. So students who are engaged in course-based, masters, part-time, to some extent there is flexibility here, and it is up to you to sort of set your milestones and so on to say, how many years do I want this to take? If you know that you will have to take, I don't know, 8 courses, so 24 credits over the course. By courses, I mean at York, they're technically half courses. I just mean a 3 credit course. So say you have to take 24 credits. Most courses are 3 credits. That tells you'll have to take 8 of them. You can kind of figure out based on when you would like to have your master's done by, how long you want to be sort of at York and paying fees and so on, and what your time constraints are, how quickly you can do it. But in a sense, a master's program, a part-time master's program gives you both more flexibility and with that more responsibility. You're setting the pace at which you go, which is great, but then it's up to you to set the pace at which you go, which is a responsibility. Um, okay, you mentioned managing a timeline for a dissertation or thesis. Is there anything you'd suggest doing to get ahead now or see more success in the future? In addition, is there anything we can do aside from investigating research and finding a supervisor during our master's to prepare for a PhD? What a lovely question. Thank you so much for that. Um, so I'm going to work from the end. I'm going to start with the question of what could you do in your master's to prepare for a PhD? Well, one thing I would doing during your master's program is let your professors know you're interested in a PhD. You know, I'm pursuing this master's because I'm interested in doctoral work. What do you suggest? And the reason is the answer might be slightly different if you're in economics, or if you're in biology, or if you're in mathematics, or if you're doing an MBA or whatever else. So you want to get the answer that's closest to your discipline's particular skills, methods, priorities, and so on. So talk to professors, but make sure they know that you are intending to do a doctoral program so they can give you good advice. The other thing I would do is take advantage of opportunities while you're in your master's program. A master's degree is very challenging. It's a different kind of challenging than the PhD. And you may not have a major research project hanging over you. It may be a smaller one like an MRP, or you may be in a coursework-based master's. Given that, take advantage of opportunities by going to departmental talks and colloquia, by participating in research workshops or meetings, by going to open labs, by going to conferences if you can, by learning as much as you can about the practice of academic research. Make sure talk to your supervisor or to your graduate program director about good courses for people who want to go on to doctoral research. Is there one foundational microeconomics course that's really going to set you up well for the demands of a doctoral degree? Do they recommend building up your skills in this area? Do they recommend that, research methods are changing and more this kind of analysis is being used? So maybe bolster this or take an extra workshop or something like that. So yeah, I would think about building as strong a foundation as you can, especially in research methods and skills. Networking, getting to know the professors in your programs, letting them know that you're serious and committed and, looking for every opportunity. And then pushing yourself. Try submitting a paper to a conference, even a student conference. Try getting used to doing a poster presentation or thinking about maybe publishing something short in a student academic journal or something like that. Start to volunteer as a research assistant on a project, or let your supervisor know that you're interested in work in their lab or something like that. Now, the more general question, is there anything you'd suggest to get ahead now or to see more success in the future? Now I'm going to get a little bit more esoteric. One of the things I'd suggest is to know yourself. Now is you will be working independently in any graduate degree, but particularly in your doctoral degree. And that means that the person who is responsible for how things go is you. And you are, in a sense, your best tool, your best research tool or method or engine forward or roadblock. And so I would suggest as much self-knowledge as possible, getting to know yourself. My doctoral degree was wonderful for teaching me all the blocks I will throw up to stop having to deal with a piece of research that is really puzzling me, whether those are absolutely needing to clean my apartment or feeling like I couldn't possibly write this chapter until I had looked up every possible reference to this argument that exists in the history of Western philosophy, because how could I be expected to say something unless I understood what everyone else had said, and so on. I am someone who struggles with perfectionism, procrastination, all the things that probably all of you struggle with. And I have had to learn how to trick myself, how to manage stress, how to make my stress productive. I am a big fan of something called structured procrastination, where I use the fact that I don't want to work on one project to get a lot done on a different project, because I convince myself I'm avoiding the thing I'm really scared of by working on this thing, and then I'll turn around and discover it's done. So if chapter two, if trying to describe the data or get the data into some sort of manageable shape is killing you, work on that literature review and get it done, or write up some of your speculative conclusions, or even just do one more piece of run another analysis that you needed to. So I've learned how to manage my own procrastination and anxiety. I've learned what times of day I work best, because sometimes if you have one big unstructured project, you may need to be managing your time. I've learned how long I can work for. I've learned whether I can do, and this has changed since I was a doctoral student in my 20s to now, how long a sprint I can do working at something. How long can I stay in front of the computer? How long can I stay in the library? How do I burn out? One of the best things I would suggest about success for the future is learning who you are and how you work, the limits to that, and not ever seeing that as a failure, because everyone has them. They're just different. Learn the shape of your limits, not to feel shame, because there's no reason to feel shame, but so that you know how to work with them and around them. And know if you're the kind of person who needs support. Remember, I said I didn't want to be alone in the room with my dissertation? I discovered that sometimes it helped just to have a dissertation buddy. Now, this is again, I'm very, very old. This was Skype, not Zoom. But sometimes we just have a Skype date where we could see each other in the corner of our screens, and we each just sat there writing our dissertations, but we weren't alone. Learn whether you need structured writing support, writing groups, I think it's called body doubling, whatever it is. Learn. Now is the time to get any assessment you might need, to find out any accommodations you need, whether they're physical or otherwise. Figure all that out, and then you'll be ready to take on the project. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of really good questions. Let me pick out a couple that maybe I can answer quickly. So I'm going to leave all the ones where people have specific questions about their applications to Eileen to sort of keep track of. But in general, we probably won't be able to answer specific questions based on one name. And if you have two names and you're applying to a program, reach out to the program first. Eileen can give you advice about that program's timelines and decisions and so on. All right. So here's an interesting one. Hi there. I've noticed that my research interests tend to evolve over time. I often start with one idea, but end up focusing on something quite different. How can I manage this process effectively so that I stay on track, especially when working towards an MRP or thesis? First of all, great question. And that's a very natural part of being the kind of curious mind who wants to do academic research. If you just focused on one idea forever, you would miss out on a lot of other ones and a sense of taking those ideas somewhere. But this is why you have a supervisor. And so one of the best things to do is stay in touch with your supervisor, send them progress reports, let them know how things are evolving. And then here's the hard part. Be prepared to listen to and take their feedback if they tell you to get back to idea number one. So a supervisor who has been doing this work a lot longer than you will be able to sense and judgment from their experience to say, no, actually, this makes sense as an evolution. I can see you were originally interested in this problem. I can see how it's moved to this application. Let's see where this goes. You still have time. Or they'll have to say, that sounds great. That's going to be your next project. Take everything on it, save it in a Word drive, save it in a Word file, create a little folder called future projects, put it in there and know you have it to come back to. Right now, it's 2 months before your defense. You need to get this done. I'd still like to see the chapter. So this is where it's very helpful to remember, even with independent your work, you're never alone as long as you listen to the advice of the people with you. Okay, to what extent is there flexibility to pursue internationally oriented research questions at York, and how broad is the scope for research within and across fields? So it's sort of hard to answer this question in the abstract, but in some sense, the answer is lots. York is a university built on the idea of interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinary research. We have a lot of programs who are interdisciplinary in identity. Just thinking about one faculty, liberal arts and professional studies, we have a graduate program in humanities, a graduate program in social and political thought. We have interdisciplinary studies, gender, feminist, and women's studies, communications and culture, uh, a variety of socio-legal studies, a variety of graduate programs, all of whom are committed to a profoundly interdisciplinary set of questions, set of methods, and methodologies and approaches and perspectives. So that is very much encouraged. It doesn't mean anything goes. And again, this is one of those you get to ask, but you do have to listen to the answer. And it's very useful to talk to your supervisor and supervisors to say, I'm interested in pulling this in. Do you think this would work within the bounds of our program, of my research question, of your expertise? So it's going to depend a lot on what exactly you want to bring together, what program you're in, and who your supervisor is, and what their comfort level is. But it's certainly possible and encouraged. And as for internationally oriented research questions, absolutely, I would say it's sort of required in many fields. And, take a look at environmental and urban change, EUC. So many of their, again, it's a whole faculty that's sort of interdisciplinary, pulling together in the arts and scientists. So many of their questions around climate, environment, ecology, human systems, and environmental systems. They're necessarily international and necessarily interdisciplinary. Okay, so from my experience, what do I think the common mistakes students make are and how can they be avoided? Really good question. I think maybe the best advice I have is graduate school is an extraordinary thing to get to do. I do think of it as a vocation and a calling and not just a chance to build skills. It's wonderful. But please remember, it is also preparation for whatever you do next. It is never going to be the pinnacle of your life's achievement. It is school. It is setting you up for the next thing, even if the next thing is more school. And I think sometimes remembering that, thinking, this is my dissertation, yes, but it's just a rough draft of a book I'm going to write. Or this is my master's thesis, but it's just round one and I'm going to do something else next. Having that perspective helps fight off the demons of perfectionism, procrastination, anxiety, performance fears that prevent us from putting work out there because we think it's not perfect yet. It's hard not to talk in cliches. The perfect is the enemy of the good. My favorite, the only good dissertation is a finished dissertation. But in general, I would say the more you can remember that school is for learning, even graduate school, and learning involves always improving, even over the final product, the more that will help you get through each of these milestones and not get held up by your own standards, not even the program standards, but your own standards, and afraid to turn something in, afraid to submit the proposal, feeling like you just have to do one more thing or one more thing. So that I would say is the biggest one. Remember, you're always preparing for what's next. And that means you're always allowed to submit something that's only 90% perfect or 85% perfect. The next one I would say is failing to plan looking forward. It can feel like there's lots of time with 5 years, but 5 years can go very quickly. And there's a lot to do in that time. So keep track of your studies, keep track of where you are. Graduate school is a wonderful opportunity to immerse yourself in exciting communities and worlds and passions and protests and projects and commitments and all of that. But remember, the best thing you can do is get your degree while you're here. And so always keep an eye on that final goal and keep measuring where your progress is and how you need to get there. Not to stress yourself up, not to feel guilty. No one moves through every stage perfectly. Everyone gets behind and then catches up. And I did. That's just what happened. I did finish my PhD in 5 years, but there were moments along the way where I wasn't sure I was going to. So keep that in mind. Keep your eye on the goal and remember the goal beyond that and the goal beyond that, and have faith in yourself. We wouldn't accept you if we didn't think you could do it. You wouldn't be here if you weren't able to do it. I have complete faith in you. I'm here and my office is here along the way, as are your graduate programs, all the support staff who are there at York to help you. your professors, most of all, your supervisor, and don't forget your peers, especially older students in the program, people who are further along. All of these sources of support are here to catch you, and I'm confident you have what it takes. Thank you so much for joining me as part of Choose Grad York this year. I wish each of you all the best as you navigate this degree and what comes next. And good luck. I hope to meet you on campus in September.